Cloud. Good morning, Jim.
Morning, Jay.
All right, Jim, so the Twins get 10 runs last night. They hit 3 home runs. They beat the Angels by 10-5 score, snapping a 4-game losing streak. Certainly nice to see the offense.
Yeah, a lot of home runs. They brought back the summer sausage, the rally sausage, which is now double bagged because it's got to be completely disgusting at this point. And they whacked them. Good at bats. When they got a pitch, they hit it a long way. Kyle Farmer, it's strange. It's such a weird game. Kyle Farmer, who had 2 homers the first 4 months of the season, 5 months of the season, I guess, now leads the Twins with 3 home runs in September. He's a capable guy, and he's a strong guy. He went through the worst slump of his career, and now he's actually paying them off for keeping him around. Wallner has been fantastic. I mean, Wallner right now is their best player. He's the best hitter, the best player, a healthy player. He's been fantastic. And remember, Matt Wallner got sent down early in the year because he was so much in his head he couldn't function. It's such a mental game. It's great to see Wallner succeeding. He's a really good guy. He really hustles. You don't see many power hitters who hustle the way Wallner does. So that's fun to see. Pablo was very good. One error led to a bunch of Julian error led to a bunch of unearned runs, but he bounced back from that and pitched very well. So, they needed to break out. They did break out. Now let's see if they can follow up with Zebby Matthews on the mound tonight. Royce Lewis gets a break after, being in an 0-for-20 slump. They need to get him going. All the injured players worked out yesterday. They're going to work out again today. Maybe by next week, some of them are coming back.
How about Pablo Lopez? He was a pretty good, pitcher second half last year. I mean, good throughout the year, but better in the second half this year. It seems like he's really picked it up. His ERA is down to 3.88. He has 15 wins. Your thoughts on Lopez?
Yeah, I mean, really, both seasons have been very similar. He was mildly disappointing the first half last year, and he was spectacular the rest of the way. He was very disappointing earlier this year, and now he's absolutely turned it on. Last month and a half, he's been fantastic, really rounding into looking like a true ace, and they're going to need him. And this is what you want your ace to do, just kind of give you a chance to end a streak, a losing streak. Again, if Julian doesn't make that error, he probably, pitches a shutout, maybe even pitches a complete game. It cost him a lot of pitches to finish that inning off. So he's been great.
Jim, so as far as getting guys back, do we know anything more? I feel like I ask you this often. Do we know anything more about the health of some of these players?
They're working out. They're all taking live batting practice this week. Correa sounds very optimistic for the first time since he got hurt. So I would think that sometime there's a lot of moving parts. They got to make sure they feel good after a couple of days of workouts. Then they have to decide is facing live pitching from minor leaguers early afternoon at Target Field. Does that allow them to skip a rehab assignment? Is that enough to get them ready to face major league hitting? I think that's their hope, is that they don't have to send these guys on rehab assignments. They can just face live arms, get their work in at Target Field, and then be ready to play in major league games. Now, of course, it doesn't guarantee that they'll be sharp when they come back, but they need to get those guys back.
Jim, the Minnesota Lynx get another win, 76-64, this time at Atlanta, so they're now 27-9. Any question about whether or not Cheryl Reeve should be the coach of the year in the WNBA?
Not for me. I think it's a pretty clear. She's a pretty clear winner. This team's coming off 2 losing seasons. Hasn't really gotten much out of the draft the last couple of years. Not even playing Diamond Miller right now, or Peely, and they didn't really alter their roster. I mean, and again, they brought in Williams and Smith, who've been very good players, but they aren't superstars. And this team is just playing beautifully together. This is basically, she has a team that feels a little less talented a lot less talented than the best teams in the league, and a little less talented than a bunch of the other teams in the league. And it looks like they have a chance of finishing second. That's remarkable. I mean, I think it's their best coaching job ever.
So, Jim, when they when the WNBA draft came around, they moved down. Instead, they could have had Angel Reese. And I know that there was, I think we had talked about this, that you had said that there are some challenges with having Angel Reese on the team. She's had a really good rookie year. Would she have not mixed well with this group?
We don't know, do we? Cheryl's never talked about this. This is just what I've gotten from people around the organization. Cheryl, one of her first big free agency class, Ariel Powers is probably the most talented player she brought in. She brought in McBride, Powers, and Achunwa. Two of those three players turned out, in Cheryl's mind, to be a complete pain in the butt. Ariel Powers was so hard to coach for her that she didn't even play her, barely played her in her final year. Achunwa did not like having her on the team either. McBride is the opposite. McBride is a very good player who also fits in perfectly and plays defense and is coachable. And in Cheryl's mind, Angel Reese was going to be a lot like Ariel Powers. Going to be tough to coach. She worried that she wouldn't fit into the team, that she worried that she had too big an ego. She decided to go with, basically trade for a player who might not be an NBA player. I mean, she traded down. She took Peely. We don't know if Peely can play in the WNBA. So she sacrificed talent for cohesiveness. I would say that based on this year's results, she may have made the right decision for what was best for this team. The question is, will she regret it deeply down the road? This team doesn't really need Angel Reese. Actually, Hines Allen has helped enough with the rebounding that they are a good defensive rebounding team with her. They're winning at an incredibly high rate. But down the road, will it hurt you that you didn't take Angel Reese, who looks like she's going to be a great rebounder? She is a great rebounder in WNBA and a talented player. You would guess that at some point they'll regret having done that. They don't regret it at this moment.
Jim, former Viking Adrian Peterson, judges ordered the former Viking to turn over assets to pay $12 million in debt. Any thoughts on that?
Let's put it this way. Knowing Adrian and knowing what I know of Adrian, I'm not exactly surprised. He's an incredible athlete, incredible, worker, physical worker. Never got the sense that he was managing his life away from the field all that well.
Jim, the Vikings have given defensive tackle Harrison Smith a 2-year contract extension. Thoughts on that decision?
Harrison Phillips, yes.
Harrison Phillips, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, he played great on Sunday. Obviously, the deal was already close. You don't just throw a deal out there because the guy has one good game. So it's obviously something they've been working on for a while. There are a lot of flashy parts of this defense. They have 3 pretty spectacular pass rushers. They have maybe a future Hall of Famer in Harrison Smith. They have veteran cornerbacks they brought in. But you got to have good line play to make it all work. And they just think Phillips holds that whole interior line together. And he's been a good guy, and he's been a good player since they got him.
Jim, what do you think about this Viking defense against a very high-powered 49ers offense, whether it be with McCaffrey or with Jordan Mason at running back?
Completely different challenge than facing the Giants. Really, the only things they really had to worry about with the Giants were they didn't want Daniel Jones getting out of the pocket and having a lot of room to run, and so they tried to contain him, and they did a good job of that. And they just didn't want Malik Neighbors making big plays down the field, and they covered him well enough that didn't happen. This is completely different. McCaffrey can beat you. Jordan Mason can beat you. Ayuk can beat you. Kittle can beat you. Samuel can beat you. Jennings is a good player. They have a great offensive coach. They have a very good offensive line. Purdy's very good. Completely different challenge. So, on my podcast and when I talk to fans in general, in person who are really fired up, I say, hey, enjoy it. Enjoy. You shouldn't. If you're a fan, enjoy the victories. Don't attach any negatives to them. Have fun. They played great against the Giants, but this is a much greater challenge. This would be a much more meaningful win if they could beat the 49ers.
Do you express kind of cautious optimism for the Vikings?
Well, here's the thing. Going into the season, depending on who asked me and when, I picked them to either win 6 or 7 games this year. I picked them to win 6 or 7 games, assuming they beat the Giants. Even though they played, I would say they played better than I expected against the Giants, and that's a good sign. But until I see how they play against good teams, I'm really not coming off my mark.
Jim, do you feel any differently about the Packers with the injury to Jordan Love and Caleb Williams' not good start in his first game despite the Bears winning? Does that make the division seem a little bit easier?
No question about it. If Caleb Williams isn't going to be the dynamo that people thought he was going to be, then that's just not a very good team. They added receivers to help him out, and if he doesn't play well and doesn't take advantage of having good receivers, then it's just the same old Bears. Obviously they played well on defense, they played well, but, Will Levis just handed them the game, let's be honest. I think the Packers at some point this year will be a very good team, but without Jordan Love, there's a chance they're going to fall behind here. I don't think Malik Willis is going to really run that offense all that well. So the Packers might have some catching up to do by the time Jordan Love comes back.
Do some teams make a mistake by not having at least a capable backup quarterback? I feel like in years past, the Vikings kind of did that when Sean Mannion was their number 2, that it could really hurt your year, that even if it's a guy has to fill in for a game or two, if you're not a competitive team, you can't win those games.
Yes, that is true. It comes down to being a salary cap league. How much do you invest in a player you don't plan on playing? It's a tough philosophical question. If you pay your backup quarterback enough to have a really good backup quarterback, then you're not paying that money to another position. So it really depends on, and there aren't many good backup quarterbacks. So do you compete for one of those financially, or do you just say, hey, we're going to have a developmental play there, or a guy who can just run our offense there? And really, you have to say that in general, the Sean Mannion gamble paid off because Cousins was almost always healthy. So they probably made the right decision in that regard instead of paying somebody who's just going to stand there for most of the season. But if you get hurt, suddenly your backup quarterback becomes the most important guy on the roster, and you better have at least a functional one.
All right, Jim, what do you got in your podcasts?
Let's see, we have the Viking Update show up, talking about all these Vikings issues in greater depth. We have John Krasinski's Timberwolves show up, the John Krasinski show. We'll have John Malay's Prep show out today, and everything's at talknorth.com or on your favorite podcast app. All
right, Jim, thank you. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Thanks, Jim.
It's Jim Souhan, Star Tribune sports columnist, joining us every weekday morning at this time. Follow him on Twitter at SouhanStrib. Check out his latest column in the Star Tribune or his podcast at talknorth.com. Jim, once again today, brought to you by the Green Mill in downtown St. Cloud. Coming up next on WJON, World and National News from ABC, and ABC News this hour is brought to you by Executive Express.